so glad you've been able to connect with the message today. My prayer for you is that you experience something of God and of God's heart for you. And as you listen to the sermon, I ask you to consider this one question. What is God stirring in you?
What a fascinating passage Matthew chapter 2 is. It really is. And it's got so much to say to us as we enter 2025. We know that the Magi, the wise men, arrived days after the birth of Jesus, because verse 11 tells us that they visited Jesus and Mary in a house, not a stable. So it's a later event. Interestingly enough, Joseph isn't mentioned at all. Maybe he was working. And though our nativity scenes of today, and some of you would have had nativity scenes up at your place, we had a couple on the inside and we have a big one with lights on the outside of our home. They inaccurately portray the shepherds and the wise men together. There's good reason why the Magi are put in the nativity scene, because Francis of Assisi, Christmas Eve at 1223, had set up a real live enacted full nativity to the entry to his town in Greccio in Italy. And he would shout to people as they went by, "See, your God is here!" And he would invite them to come and look at the baby, who of course wasn't Jesus, but was a reenacted Jesus, and endeavouring to really get their attention. And I think it's important we need to remember that people in medieval times couldn't read or write. So having a visual image of the nativity scene with all of the characters in it was so helpful for teaching about Christ's birth. There's not a lot we know about the Magi, the wise men. Not a great deal. We know that they came from the east. We don't know how they got their information about a Messiah baby who was going to be king. Though it's true that the fact that they have arrived from out of town from the east points to Christ's coming being an international coming. They followed a star to Jesus, we know that, but we don't know why they were so motivated to worship Jesus and bring the gifts. Wouldn't it be great to find out the why? Why are you here? Where did you hear about this in the first place? We just don't have that dialogue or information in the passage. We have no dialogue of them talking to each other. We know that they were smart and astute, but there's just nothing in the dialogue saying, "Hey, what do you think of this Herod guy? I think he's, pretty self-focused. I think we'll skip going back to him." There's no dialogue like that. And after verse 12, they are not mentioned again in the New Testament. They're gone. They come in for 12 verses, have this massive impact, and then they're gone. Wow. But what do we know about them? Let's have a look at that. We know that they make an audacious claim, and I've only really thought about that this week. They make the claim that a baby has been born, or will be born, to be king of the Jews. Now, when you think about it, a royal baby is normally born as a prince, not a king. And I'm sure that would have got Herod's attention. He would have thought, whoa, what's going on here? Matthew tells us that the Magi went to the palace in Jerusalem where kings should be born. But that was a massive but understandable mistake on their part. The wise men now had to deal with a manipulative and insanely jealous Herod. And Matthew tells us also that the wise men learned from the Jewish scribes that the Christ would be born in Bethlehem through the prophecy that appeared in Micah chapter 5. With this new information, the Magi followed the star to Bethlehem and were astute enough to know that Herod was trying to choreograph and manipulate their visit. So they didn't report back to him. They went home a different way. I would just love to know the conversations they had. Can you imagine? I think a play on that could be written. It'd just be brilliant. Matthew also tells us that their intent, their passion and their focus for finding and worshipping Jesus did not waver. It wasn't about them. And in fact, they become John the Baptist-like characters, where there's not a great deal that we know about them, but they point very clearly to the Christ child, to the Messiah, to the one who will save the world. And they point to all that is in Jesus. So what on earth does that have to do with you and me as we enter 2025? Well, actually, I'd like to suggest that it has everything to do with our year ahead. How's your year ahead looking? We may find help in setting goals for the new year and in living out resolutions. But our new year will be transformed if we see the immense value of our focus and intent, the focus and intent that the wise men had in looking for Jesus and looking to Jesus. That's the key. What is the focus and intent of our life or your life? What has grabbed and arrested your primary attention? Is it to look to Him who is your strength, your rock, your inspiration, your life? Or have other things diverted you? I find it interesting in reflecting on this. God has created us in His image. As images, we are designed to reflect or reveal something other than ourselves. Every one of us is called to do that. In other words, our purpose is unique and different from that of other creatures in the way that a mirror differs from other objects. Where a painting or a vase is displayed to draw attention to its own beauty, a mirror is not. Instead, the purpose of the mirror is to draw attention to the object it reflects. The wise men were great mirrors. We are called to be mirrors reflecting the very image of Jesus, even though we are flawed. We reflect the image, and the reality is we reflect the image of what we behold. And that's the scary part. What do you behold as of greatest value? And this means the purpose and meaning are not found within ourselves, despite what our culture says. Our culture says, look in yourself, find the answers. Rubbish. Instead, purpose and meaning are defined by whatever external object captivates our heart, and this is reflected through our lives. So have a think about what your treasure is, because that's where our heart will be, and that's what we will reflect. We are mirrors. What a wonderful calling that we have in our life to go out there and to be mirrors of Jesus. God created us to find our purpose in Him. He is what we are to behold and reflect. But if we reject this calling, we do not stop reflecting the insignificant things of the idols we value. We will reflect something. So we need to be challenged as to what we reflect. No matter what you face in this new year, your focus is the key to your life. And over again in the New Testament, this is captured. Jesus knew this. And he gave us the greatest direction when he said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added to you. He knew that this would be best for us if we sought his kingdom first. That's a key point. Secondly, as the Magi did, we will make mistakes. We are flawed people. We are sinful people. And we are called to learn, as the Magi did, to learn from our mistakes quickly. We must keep a short account of our sin, of our errors, and move on, repent, turn, and say, God, I've stuffed it up. I need to sort this out quickly. And thirdly, there will always be Herods in our life. We must never start the year, even though it's great to have a year of happiness and joy, but we know that our year will not be totally smooth. And that's why we want to embrace God. It's interesting when we look at Herod and the evil influence that he had. The Herods can pop up and manifest in so many different ways. Through some of our silly decisions, through our own flawed human nature. In fact, through the enemy attacking us. That we always need to remember, as C.S. Lewis said, that we need to make sure that we can either give the devil too much attention or alternatively too little attention. It's important for us to remember that there will always be Herods in our year ahead, and we are in a spiritual battle. And that will manifest, if it's not in the financial area, it might be in the area of health, the area of grief, relationships or work. There will be a manifestation of that challenge. But Christ calls us to keep our eyes on him. Isn't it a wonderful thing that as we're reminded of our imperfections and the fact that our life is in a clay jar that can be broken, that in that clay jar that we each have, our life, we have this treasure of Christ, the Spirit of Jesus living. So there's perfection living within our imperfection. It is a normal thing for us to face the Herods in our life. And as we come to the Hebrews passage, chapter 12, can I encourage you to allow God to speak to you this year through this passage? I love this passage. It's also a passage that has mystery about it because we do not know who the author is. We've got some guesses, but we're not sure. But the author wrote this passage and said things like this, reminding us, we are surrounded by so many encouragers, a great cloud of witnesses, and some of them are the Magi, who say, behold this King. He is the one to center your life on. Be encouraged that you are not alone. There are those who've gone before you who love the Lord, who are saying, come on, you can do it. You're going to be okay this year. God is with you. Secondly, the passage says, now is the time to throw off everything that drags us down. We need to get rid of it. And the sin that so easily entangles us. And probably the biggest things that are a challenge to us in ticking over to a new year are leaving behind any guilt or regret of the past and not taking in, as we look to the future, anxiety and fear of what lies ahead. God is the great I am, the God of the present moment, and God calls us to live in his Spirit in the present. Let's set aside the guilt of the past or whatever it might be of the past, and let's set aside the anxiety and fear that may be there for some for the future. And as we enter 2025, let's run the race of our life, as it says, with perseverance. And then it says the race marked out for us, not someone else's race, your race. Your race. Run the race marked out for you. But the absolute key of the message today is what follows here. Fixing your eyes on Jesus. Fixing your eyes on Jesus, as the Magi did. Goals, plans are important, but focus and intent in a global sense is just so vital. Our focus needs to be on the one who has been so faithful to us. His mercy never fails us. And we're called to consider the one who endured such opposition. And we do that so that we will not grow weary or lose heart.